am I supposed to believe that they actually made a whole expansion about this one Easter egg, this one reference to a panda in Warcraft 3? Because that is exactly what Blizzard did. Hello there, MMO Andes, and welcome back to I Played 100 Hours Of, a monthly series where I play an MMO for 100 hours, an arbitrary number serving as a silly benchmark for when things should start becoming fun. And today we're going back to World of Warcraft, back to an expansion of old, where a panda on a glaive and a side character in Rexar's campaign story spawned not only an entire race, but an entire expansion based off of that race. An expansion that is definitely not copied off of this movie, which released 4 years earlier. Surely the Blizzard of old makes their own original lore. They would never copy someone else's copied work copied from another source in an orgy of copy sluttery. That isn't my Blizzard. So let's see the results of Blizzard's 100% not copied and original homework. Now viewable because of an event called WoW Mists of Pandaria Remix, with the class race combination that truly started my journey in WoW, the Void Elf Shadow Priest. Perfect. We start off in an isolated bubble of time, and Eternus is conveniently here to tell us all about time walking. They want us to go back in time to replay significant events that occurred in Pandaria, all without altering the timeline. And this is why I hate time shenanigans. There is absolutely zero way we will not alter the past, because we are going to be meeting iconic characters and beating up dungeon and raid bosses, which means the people in the original timeline that did all of these will no longer be the ones who did those activities. Unless of course they changed the lore so that everything that happened in Mists of Pandaria was actually because of time travelers, which is always a horrible thing to do to your lore, especially with the ease of time travel in World of Warcraft. You just need a bronze dragon to clap his hands and suddenly you have a different timeline. But WoW's lore has never been its strong point, so we may as well go out there and murder someone for some reason. And they give us something called the Cloak of Infinite Potential, one of the main draws of this game mode. And as the name implies, it's supposed to give you a lot of power, eventually, with zero limits. So your dreams of 100% and upwards haste is now achievable. So rest in peace classes that don't have dots. You're pretty much capped at 100. Shadow Priests are not. We are then tasked to destroy Eratus, whose spectrals put Asian women to shame. And since it's day one, you can be sure that everything is going to be chaotic. It's a game of tag first, ask questions later. And after bashing in his massive pectorals, it is time to go into Pandaria. We are dropped into a cutscene of what I assume to be Varian Rin, and boy, his model leaves something to be desired. Boy, he did not age well. And surprise, Anduin goes missing, so it's Shadowlands all over again. Off to rescue the Boy King in this relatively massive for Warcraft airship. Well, you know the drill. And while we slowly edge ourselves to completion while doing this insanely slow intro quest, I would like to thank everyone who supported my last MMO video. A big thanks to all of you. And if you're interested in supporting the channel and getting more MMO and gaming content, please don't forget to drop a like on the video and hit that subscribe button. Maybe even ring the bell for future notifications. Any and all support would be greatly appreciated. And you know what I just realized with the old World of Warcraft? Just look at how violent it is. Here we are mowing down horde soldiers and civilians using a machine gun after getting inspired by this message with light racist undertones. We go on to bomb their ships full of explosive material, and then parachute down to kill whatever's left and destroy their supplies, culminating with painting the seaport red with the blood of the survivors of the ship we blew up earlier. And just in the span of a few minutes, we've committed a ton of war crimes, which apparently is the innate racism of the Horde versus the Alliance against each other being exacerbated by something called the Shah. This was just the intro quest, and I was paying more attention to it than I ever did to any storyline in Dragonflight. Dragonflight's storyline centers on healing, renewal, resting, and pacifism, with characters who spend the vast majority of their questlines trauma dumping on you, a random observer. Now, therapy is necessary in real life, but being the third-party participant to a story with characters who are so one-sided towards peace just makes for a very boring story. And so instead of talking about our problems, we go and kill them. The more interesting thing to do in a video game. We go down to the local village of the natives to interact with them, and I have to say, this expansion is really aesthetically pleasing. These trees are a vast improvement over Eversong Woods trees, and most trees in the old world. And surprisingly, the guys who told me not to interfere with the past are just there, in the middle of this town, in broad daylight. And they surprisingly offer me a quest about dragon riding, which is good because not everyone has tried dragon riding. You could be one of those people who skip the expansion, or the classic people who don't want to touch retail ever again. So now you can't go online and complain to the forums that you were never taught how to dragon ride, and now you can be more efficient with doing the chores the lazy villagers have delegated to you. And of course, like a crazy ex, we just can't keep our hands off of the horde. So we go invade their base and kill a Shah-infested warlock named Gatrul, who has been influenced by the Shah to apparently abduct Pandarian children. Because when do warlocks dominate others, right? We turn him into a pile of black dust and immediately we start recruiting the neutral villagers by telling them that the horde is warlike and we are peaceful, only acting in self-defense. We even put up a large unarmed and safe embassy in the sky. They refuse to believe our bullshit for correct reasons and warn us not to bring war to Pandaria, which of course we ignore. After opening up a few chests back in the village, we finally get our first socket, this one being called a cogwheel socket, which grants you a mobility ability your class may or may not have, such as Blink, which is typically reserved for mages. These cogwheel slots are confined to your boots or feet item, and you can only have one of them at any time. So if you want Spirit Walker's Grace, Heroic Leap, and Blink, you're out of luck. Sorry, you can't have too much fun in this game mode. But to the wheelchair-bound Shadow Priest, even just this one Blink is very significant. We go off and rescue a man named Admiral Taylor, and I have no idea who he is. But he is Alliance, so we rescue him and go to the local village after, brawling with the wild local animals into an area called the Pearlfin Village, filled with another race called the Jinyu, a species that has evolved beyond circling each other in a fishbowl. And I'm surprised they haven't made this into an allied race yet, since we're all in on furries and scalies anyway. Instead of adding another variation of an elf, they could have just added sexable Magikarps instead. Big missed opportunities. But at least this village led to one of the more memorable side quests I've ever had in a game. Centered around a group of Alliance agents named Rel, Sully, Mishka, Amber, and 2 Jinyu whose names I forgot. We start off rescuing Amber so that she can help us with our mission to find Anduin. They aren't doing too good though. And even though this is a quest I don't really like, which is an RP quest where you control another character with OP abilities, I actually enjoy doing this quest because of the characters. These characters add more life and personality in them than Caligos, and most of the dragon aspects in Dragonflight. These characters are violent, are quite anti-horde, and unquestioningly subservient to the Alliance and their orders. And these are actually the type of one-sided characters that are entertaining. Unfortunately, their characters are not developed after this questline. I don't think I've ever even seen them except for Amber Kiernan. But anyway, Rel here rescues Amber, a human sniper who helps Sully, this dwarf, do some espionage in hopes of tracking Anduin. Sully is distracted by a local friendly raccoon who is killed by a trigger-happy Amber, which doesn't matter because shortly afterwards we get another one and we name him Sock. And while we were busy black widowing and befriending friendly rocket raccoons, Rel was attacked and now we have to look for aid. We find a house in the woods with a jade statue of an orc. And that can't be a red flag, right? Because an orc is obviously green. So we go talk to the inhabitant of this house, who also wants to turn us into green flags. Thankfully, we have a meat shield in the form of a raccoon, who is transformed into jade instead of us. We also go around and butcher a lot of Hosen, another sapient race in Pandaria, in our search for Anduin. And of course they fail, so it's up to me. And what do? I go around and drink a random stranger's drug-addled tea left out in the open, allowing me to hallucinate all about Anduin. And here we are getting caught at 180p getting high on some Pandaria tea. Thankfully, Lore Walker Cho here doesn't really mind, because that means he gets to teach us all this cool hippie stuff like trimming a tree and painting some wonderful portraits. Portraits like this child. Wait a minute, I remember this child. Wasn't this the child in Warcraft 3? A child I may or may not have done some violent stuff to just in case it has loot. Anyway, back to Lore Walker Cho's tasks. Since we did drink his dream brew without his permission, he asked us to get materials for it so that we can get high together. For a good reason, of course, to find Anduin, who is being cornered by 4 Hosen. And he's specced into Holy, apparently. A healing spec, when he could have been a Shadow Priest. And what are priests good at, you may ask? Well, they're good at fearing people and running away. Thankfully, Pandaria is filled with friendly kung fu masters, and Anduin is safe, and we know exactly where he is. We try to convince him to come back with us to Varian, but he just wants to go on a solo adventure, so he mind controls Sully and he just leaves, and we're not going to chase after him. We're not all mind controlled, And now here we are fighting against each other. Typical storytelling. And that's the end of the Alliance questline in Jadefire Forest. We're almost level 20 and I've yet to get a single useful Tinker Gem. Now, what are Tinker Gems? They are these special gems that have special effects. And for DPS players, they typically come in a package of a random proc that deals an X amount of damage, or have your healing spells drain your life in exchange for some haste. Most of them are pretty boring, but they are very, very powerful. powerful. And while this is supposed to be a meme game mode, I was hoping for something more interesting than this. Something that actually interacts with their class. And it's a good thing they have these metagems, of which you can only equip one. They are on a pretty long cooldown and provide some pretty unique effects, like 5 seconds of resource-free casting, which is still boring but a lot more interesting than randomly firing rockets at your enemies as a Shadow Priest. My expectations were low and Blizzard met those expectations. And of course, since we're supposed to be sneaky and not interrupting the timeline, here we are establishing a tiny little hidden base, from which you can get dailies, which reward you with bronze and a cache of infinite treasures, which itself rewards bronze and a gem, prismatic gems I mean, with a chance to reward you with a tinker, cogwheel, or meta gem that you don't have yet. All the cosmetic vendors are also conveniently located here, and they're asking 5,000 bronze for a single armor set? That is a lot of bronze. Or it looks like it's a lot of bronze. We don't really know the bronze situation until we reach level 70, so let's not worry about it too much right now. There's also a vendor that sells you gems, which sounds like a waste of bronze, right? And she also sells rings, necklaces, and trinkets, all of which are tied behind specific achievements. And this is the only way you will ever get those slots, so you have to do the achievements, like doing all the raids, or completing a story quest line, or tied to specific scenarios. And this looks like a long-term goal to me, so let's go back to leveling. We go around and tie some loose ends like this jade-obsessed widow, and going around and being a generally helpful person. And in between we get our first mention of CHEN STORMSTOUT. This is CHEN STORMSTOUT, right? There's no way it's not going to be CHEN STORMSTOUT. I love this guy back in Warcraft 3, but apparently it's not on this zone. So back to questing and training with the local Pandaran. Now I don't know why I'm doing this activity, because I am not a monk, but we do what we have to do to get some bronze. And after helping all the local Pandaren, we get to meet Yulon, one of the August Celestials, who are wild gods much like Ursol and Ursok. And while we're busy doing all of that, the Horde and the Alliance are ready to go do what the locals told them not to do. Go to war. And of course we go to war near the statue that is supposed to be a reincarnation vessel for Yulon. And here we go again, doing what we're best at, murking each other. The statue also wants a piece of that action and decides to try and kill the Alliance and Horde leadership. And fail. And all this chaos, death, and destruction causes an ugly monster to come out of the statue. And of course, we go on the most logical thing, we go on a bombing run, a friendly bombing run, to make the ground assault a lot more manageable. Sorry Yulon, but looks like you're gonna be keeping your old body for a while. Just gotta keep your appearance up with a few autologous plasma facials and Botox. After going on a few reverse victory laps around her statue, Yulon delivers us to the Valley of the Four Winds, to walk the earth and learn a lesson with CHEN. And why am I the one undergoing a lesson? I'm not the one leading the assaults here, I'm just a loyal Alliance soldier. And here we meet the man himself, CHEN
Is trouble brewing?
STORMSTOUT. You seem a lot less parched than what you looked like in Warcraft 3, and good old CHEN here teaches us about something we're familiar with, doing chores. Story-wise, the Valley of the Four Winds is as filler goes. We go around the valley helping people with random tasks. Pretty standard fare activities for an MMO. The vibes of the zone are actually very similar to the ones I get in Dragonflight. But unlike in Dragonflight, where every character just sounds very sad, and when they're happy they still sound sad, the characters in this zone are pretty lighthearted. Like this guy who was possessed by a Shah of Depression. He refuses to go back to the village so that we can initiate treatment, and so we just roll him around. CHEN also finds his family, because he's apparently not from Pandaria. And unfortunately, they aren't too welcoming of him. And instead of moping around and dragging us with him, CHEN decides to utilize his brew mastering skills instead. We go around and gather some resources, which CHEN uses to create the perfect brew, which we're going to use to impress the STORMSTOUT family. Unfortunately, the brewery is littered with beer elementals, plus a bunch of Frozen who want to...
Me gonna hook you in the duker.
I'm neither a fan of getting ookered in the dookered or getting dookered in the ookered. Gonna pass on this one. We clean up the brewery and find the location of the other STORMSTOUTs, who are scattered all over Pandaria, marking the end of CHEN's story in the Valley of the Four Winds, at least until we get invaded by bugs. And instead of dealing with them, we search for the hidden master and get some kung fu training. And while we're busy, CHEN has organized the local defense force, and we get attacked by a big cockroach. So we launch ourselves into its mouth, and using the power of kung fu, we tear it apart and blow it up using our bare hands. We get sent into the air and land gracefully like a cat with 9 lives. What a perfect storyline. and that's the Valley of the Four Winds. Except there's another questline where we butcher a bunch of animals, just like what we did in Grizzly Hills. Unfortunately, the other zones are not as interesting as the ones in the Jade Forest and the Valley of the Four Winds. Kunlai Summit is a mixed bag of Mogu invasion and very ruthless slaughter of Morhosen. I mean, just look at this. This type of violence you will never ever see in Dragonflight. I decided I needed a break from leveling, and so I attempted this normal scenario called Blood in the Snow, where I get mowed down like a horde civilian. Well, that was pathetic. Oh well, back to leveling. We go to Townlong Steppes next, which is all about a Mogu invasion, plus a Mantid invasion. And we help stop the Mantid invasion by gathering some of their limbs. I don't know what we're going to use those limbs for, but at this point we've already committed so many war crimes, so it's better not to ask. And midway through we reach max level, and I use all of the bronze I've accumulated to start upgrading my gear. And you're definitely going to need to upgrade your gear because of a particular quirk that World of Warcraft has. A typical RPG follows the formula of get levels to start out-leveling your enemies, all the while trying to get better gear for more power, which also typically encompasses most of the endgame activities you do once you hit max level. But in World of Warcraft, enemies not only scale with your level, meaning levels are practically worthless and removing the ability to outscale your enemies, but for some reason they also scale with your gear. If you equip a more powerful item, enemies will also get more powerful, albeit at a slower pace than you, adding an unnecessary level of complexity and making those early gear upgrades feel a lot less worth the effort. The two scaling systems also create an unfortunate interaction, wherein gaining levels makes you a lot weaker, especially as you approach the level cap, and this is tied into the secondary stat system. Secondary stats like haste, versatility, critical strike, and mastery can only be acquired from gear, and you get more of it as you get better gear. And to counter this, as you level up, the amount of stats you need to gain 1% of a secondary also increases, but the amount of secondary stats you need scale a lot faster than the amount of secondary stats you get from gear, because getting gear is meant to be an endgame activity, one that you do for months on end. And all of these scaling interactions makes your leveling close to the level cap and the first few hours you spend at the level cap very painful. In Mop Remix, almost every single ability will one-shot you and your tank. For example, in this heroic dungeon, where I somehow rip aggro from the tank. In one moment, everyone is alive and well, and just a few seconds later, the boss does his mechanic and someone is instantly dead. I was mid GCD, so I couldn't even heal him. Not that my healing spells would have healed him for 50% of his health in 1 second. But this is the Mop Remix experience at max level. Every single dungeon is going to rip your team apart, especially Blood DKs who don't Death Strike. And for some reason, aggro is also very janky in this game mode. As a healer, I keep getting threat on everything, every pull, even though I'm not really topping any damage or healing meters. But eventually I get to the last dungeon I need for an achievement, and after a few grueling deaths, eventually finish it. Netting us our juicy second trinket. I get around to finishing the other 2 achievements and eventually unlock 2 rings. Unlocking the neck, however, requires me to do raids on normal difficulty, which doesn't have the convenience of a group finder. So let's apply for a few groups, beat up some raid bosses, and finish our first raid, the Mogushan Vaults. Unlike heroic dungeons, normal raids are actually tuned pretty well, at least for this particular raid. Unfortunately, it's hard to find groups for other raids, so let's make another character instead. Named Cowfall. After setting my macros and UI, we go skip the intro quest, which should net us our Cloak of Infinite Potential, supposedly an upgraded version. And this is what you get. I don't know why I was under the impression that the Cloak of Infinite Potential was account-wide, or would at least grant you a portion of your power to your alts, but it is not. Instead, you get a puny amount of stats plus 100% experience gain, and honestly I was disappointed. I wanted to level a bunch of characters, but if this is all the power I get, I don't think I want to anymore. But let's go ahead and do the intro quest for the Horde, which plays exactly like the Alliance version. There's even a Horde version of Rel and his companions. I don't want to spend too much time leveling this character, and so I attempt to mail him a few gems. But even in a fun game mode, you're not supposed to have fun. Your recipient cannot receive mail. Really? I'm supposed to do everything all over again? Ah well, let's get to it. Let's go around, do some quests in this ridiculous Moonkin form, and reach max level in just 9 hours. Easy peasy, cow is cheesy. And at this point, I don't know what to do. What even is the endgame for Mop Remix? Do I just go do dungeons and raids? Or should I participate in degenerate activities such as sending a million frogs to the Shadowlands? Nah, let's see what the other quest zones have to offer, like the Alliance quest in Krasarang Wilds. which lead me to Stormwind, where I am definitely not lost and know exactly where I'm supposed to be going. Where I definitely didn't take the tram to Ironforge and waste precious minutes of my life. Yup, I definitely know where I'm going. We go around and delivering drinks to random people, which eventually escalates to an alliance invasion of a horde-occupied territory, where we see King Varian mansplaining to Tyrande, a sentinel general for 10,000 years, all about war tactics. Surely this general with 10,000 years worth of experience knows what she's doing. Surely she doesn't get written like a complete moron. God, they've butchered you so badly, Tyrande. But at least you haven't experienced Shadowlands Tyrande yet. I miss Warcraft 3 Night Elves and Tyrande. And to top it all off, this is the most boring scenario ever. I'm just going to and fro between two different alliance bases trying to help them, because they can't do anything themselves. Eventually, we managed to draw the horde out of their heavily fortified position, where we doused them in cooking oil and then turned them into crispy chicken tenders. 2012 World of Warcraft was so violent. With the main bulk of the army eliminated, it's time to eliminate their elite. And kill their commander all by myself, so that Tyrande and Varian can come in and claim all of the glory. And Tyrande learns a valuable lesson, a lesson she probably would never have learned in her 10,000 years of being alive. We go to espionage activities after, where we learn of an artifact called the Divine Bell, which I acquire because I'm the main character. They portal it up to Darnassus and they leave me here, by myself. If you can conjure a portal for a bell, you can conjure a portal for me. Please? No? Okay then. Guess I have to take the scenic route. Oh, don't worry, this place is totally safe. A perfect place for relaxation even. I can already feel the positive chi flowing into my body. And of course, because all characters in this game are idiots, the bell gets stolen almost immediately. We trace it to a portal back to Dalaran, one of the neutral mage cities in World of Warcraft, whose pro-horde faction, the Sunreavers, have been actually stabbing us behind the back. Jaina gets really pissed, calling out the leader Aethys and summoning a peaceful water elemental who definitely doesn't murk random people who may or may not have something to do with the stealing of the Divine Bell. Jaina banishes them from the city, and we begin Stratholme 2.0. We purge the city of 100% guilty criminals and rebels. Definitely not fleeing civilians. I mean, look at them, they're punching me. I'm just doing self-defense, right, Jaina? We are the most moral army in this world. But eventually I fall to the call of degenerate activities, so I go around for hours on end. I didn't know Dalaran could hold 1 million citizens. They've been falsifying their census records too, these horde barbarians. But I do eventually get bored and switch over to the other side, where the Alliance apparently has a few million soldiers too. If we had these many soldiers, why were we having such a hard time with the Lich King and the Legion? If all those displaced Sunreavers cast a fireball into the Frozen Throne, the Lich King would cease to exist. Sadly, a god from beyond has noticed the degeneracy going on under the tunnels, and the day after, the Alliance population was decimated. There's still a million displaced Sunreavers though, so we continue our purge of Dalaran. But you know what's more fun than murking civilians? Murking a bunch of bugs. The bug population has reached a critical level, so we have to cull them. For bronze, of course, our precious resource. Just 2 hours later, I've accumulated more power and bronze than I've ever had questing, or doing dungeons even. The rewards for doing anything in this game mode other than mindless frogging, goading, or even purging Dalaran of its 1 billion citizens is pretty low. Genociding the bugs in Straveth gets me around 10k bronze per hour. Completing a raid or spamming dungeons with bugs rewards maybe a generous fourth of this amount in the same time frame. And you might be asking, why are we so obsessed with bronze? Because in a baffling decision, they tied the same currency for player power and cosmetic rewards, the two main draws of this game mode. So now you get to choose. Do you get the many cosmetic rewards, or do you invest into player power so that you can potentially accelerate currency acquisition by a tiny bit, assuming you manage to get the willpower to play this game mode for the entirety of its duration? It's been hours for me and I've yet to buy a single cosmetic reward. And these cosmetic rewards are expensive. People have even computed all the bronze you need to buy the cosmetics, which goes into the millions. I've been playing for hours already and I've invested all of my money into player power, and my character has barely made any progress. And at this point, I start to regret not doing the frog farming, because according to the people that did it, that is way more than 10k bronze per hour. But at least we managed to avoid getting tagged as frog farmers. And finally, we did it. We reached a cumulative 100 hours split between a druid and a shadow priest. This experimental game mode was one of the best things they've tried in a while, even including good old Thunderstorm, which I barely played. I got to experience the Mists of Pandaria storyline. Well, most of the Mists of Pandaria storyline, plus how Blizzard used to write their stories. all without having to resort to private server shenanigans. It's a shame we played it with the Dragonflight classes. It would have been interesting to try Mists of Pandaria Shadow Priest and Mists of Pandaria Balance Druid. For a significant amount of people, Mists of Pandaria was the peak of class design. I do wish they made more experimental game modes like this, and just go ham with it honestly. Retail WoW has become quite formulaic for me. An expansion releases, there's tons to do, open world content matters until Raid and M+ opens up, then you play until you get tired. Then a new season comes up, new area added with bullet sponge unsoloable rares with a new raid, and so you play Raid and M+ until you get tired until another season comes out. Rinse and repeat until a new expansion comes out. The few things I disliked about this game mode was the Tinker Gems being just generic X damage procs, and I think the biggest problem this game mode has was the pacing of the game. Bronze acquisition and power scaling was pretty janky, especially at the start, so much so that farming is the best way to earn bronze in this game mode. And Blizzard continually nerfing farming spots left a gaping hole in the bronze acquisition system, and hopefully one day they balance it. It's also baffling that they tied the currency for player power and cosmetics into one. Deciding between purchasing cosmetics and player power is not usually a decision that makes people happy. People usually want both, not one or the other. This is a sentiment shared across all player bases, no matter what type of player they are. From the most casual to the most seasoned veteran, nobody likes choosing between player power and cosmetics ever. And I hope Blizzard learns this lesson. But of course, it's only been 6 days since this game mode released. There's still a lot to do and a lot of time for changes to happen. But for now, I've wasted yet another 100 of my hours. But I got myself this pretty neat cloak. There's still a lot more adventures to be had in WoW, and in many other MMORPGs. But that is all for this video. Thank you for watching. I will be seeing you next month in another MMO.